What is going on, everybody? Welcome to episode 45 of the Everyday Sens podcast. I am Jack Richardson, joined by always by Brennan Parks with a regular season edition of the Everyday Sens podcast. It took us 45 episodes to get here. We sat on this one for a little bit because we wanted to wait until rosters were due at 5 p.m. on Monday night. We're recording right now, Tuesday afternoon Easter time anyway. Morning skate just happened for the Sens. They're traveling to Carolina right now. Lots to dive into, obviously. So, Brendan, how are you doing on this Tuesday, October 10th? Got the season opening tomorrow.
Doing well. Yeah, we finally got hockey back, and that is the biggest part. Obviously, we've got a lot to talk about because we're not exactly where we thought we'd be with the Sens, but yeah, the main thing is that hockey's back. The preseason's done. 6-2 record for Ottawa. Great showing. I don't think they could have done much better. They obviously, their decisions didn't really, I don't think, mirror what happened. I mean, they've got some guys starting in the AHL who you wouldn't expect, but that's all due to the salary cap, and that's going to be interesting to talk about because we're not used to it. Like, we haven't talked about the salary cap in Ottawa in ever. Like, it's been so long since we've had to worry about anything like this. So on one hand, it's frustrating to see some of the decisions, and on the other hand, it's like refreshing because it's just something that like the Sens need to be doing is managing the cap. In their first season really doing that, it'll be interesting to see how it goes. But regardless, hockey tomorrow night, actually hockey tonight, but Ottawa Senators hockey tomorrow night is what we're looking forward to. We're going to be breaking it down. We're going to be going live before the game to talk about it. Obviously, there's going to be some more updates tomorrow probably about the roster and what's happening. So regardless, yeah, it's exciting, and I'm excited to see kind of how we do as well with regular season hockey around the corner because like we haven't broken it down together yet, like you said. So it's gonna be fun to kind of get our new schedule going and see what we can do and the content we can come up with because I love the offseason. There's a lot of time to make content, but it gets dry after a while. You know, it's been months without hockey, and even the preseason at the end of it, I was like, all right, it's enough of this. Like Brady Tkachuk said, he came out and said, I'm done with training camp. I don't even care about that. Like, it was fun while it lasted, great. We like it, but like, forget about it. We don't care about that. We want to play the regular season and the games that matter. So I'm excited for tomorrow, and we've got a lot to talk about.
Yeah, if the preseason was any indication of how fun it's going to be to break down games and everything doing this podcast, like it'll be a blast, obviously. Lots to get into. You mentioned the salary cap issues. We're going to start with that and just kind of trickle everything down into we're not going to preview tomorrow night because we're going to do that with our live. Like you mentioned, we're going to go live before the game tomorrow, little pregame edition because we're both free. We're going to try and do that a little bit more, assuming it goes well. I'm sure it will because we like the lives, but we're going to try and go pregame when we can. We both have the day off or we're off around those times. Just think it's a good way to get engagement going. People are going to be hyped tomorrow. It's going to be a nice ramp up into the season. So we're going to save the preview for tomorrow night's game for tomorrow or for Wednesday before the game, depending when people are listening to this. But right now, we're just going to talk about their lineup because, as I mentioned, they were due at 5 p.m. on Monday. Final rosters for every team. A lot of teams were up against the cap, so they had to get creative, and the Sens are one of them, but the Sens have not gotten creative yet. Most teams, and I know that it might get lost in translation. Like, obviously, you play 12 forwards, you play 6 defensemen, 2 goalies. Like, those are the guys on the bench every night. That's a standard roster size for any NHL team. What most teams have, though, is 1 or 2 healthy scratches too, which also make an NHL salary. So when we're making a big deal and people make a big deal with the Sens only dressing 11 forwards, 6 defensemen, and 2 goalies, that's not a big deal. That's who they're carrying. They literally pretty much have 3 roster spots open that they can't afford to pay anyone because with the roster that they have with the 11 forwards, 60 and 2 goalies, that's 62,000 in cap space. It's not enough money. So that's right up against the cap for them. So I guess we could just start this by talking about how does it feel, I guess, being in that scenario? Because people are rightfully pointing out that, you know, the Leafs, I think, did it a lot last year. Vegas probably, where they only dressed 11 forwards, dressed a man short. That's not a big deal when you talk about the salary cap. But beginning of the year, tons of time. It just feels like a self-inflicted injury.
Yeah, like the funny thing is, like, I have so much optimism about this season. I feel really excited, like genuinely. I felt very happy, very positive. It's always like there's always this happy aura around myself when hockey season comes around because even at the start of October, I'm like, listen, I'm counting the days. We've got 11 more days to go until the first game. And then like the first game comes around and I don't want to be too negative. I really don't because even though there are some like frustrating decisions and things that are happening here that could have been avoided, I still think we need to be happy and excited because regardless of who's playing, who's missing, like Ottawa has a very good core of players and frankly their defense and goaltenders look incredible. So we'll start with that little positive vibe before we talk about a few negative things, just because I don't want to be too negative. But I do think that it was all kind of self-inflicted, right? The Sens are going to start the season without Josh Norris and Shane Pinto. Now, Norris, nobody's at fault for that. I don't blame Pierre Dorion for that. The medical staff, like, they couldn't have seen this. He was on track to start. At the same time, it is kind of wild that they thought he'd miss 2 preseason games at most, and then he'd play, and it just keeps getting delayed. Like, you've got to be able to see this. DJ Smith pointed to maybe it being a mental thing with Norris. Regardless of what it is, I mean, this guy's got to get back in the lineup. The positive side of that is that he's not going to be going on long-term injured reserve as of right now. Who knows a week from now, but as of right now, he's not going to be. LTIR would obviously save his cap, so they'd have the space temporarily until he comes back to use. However, he would have to miss 10 games in 24 days at least. And I mean, if you're missing Josh Norris for that long again to start the year, like, I can just see a bad start coming, right? Like, that's just going to set that up. Norris has been practicing with a contact jersey. He's been, like, it seems like he's on the verge of playing. I could see him playing this weekend, maybe. Obviously, a few more days, but that's all hopeful, hopefully, like, optimism and whatnot. So Pinto is where it really gets complicated. And if you look at their lineup that we're going to talk about, it sucks because they're really short at center now. Pinto, it's reported that Ottawa's offered him $1.9 million by 2 years. He wants at least $2.5 million by 2 years. That's what Elliot Friedman said. So, I mean, they're not far off, but at the same time, like, this whole cap situation, they signed Tarasenko to a $5 million deal. They signed Korpisalo for $5 million a year, which people thought was quite high, right? Or $4 million a year, which people thought was quite high. And that's $9 million right there between Tarasenko and Korpisalo, right? You look at Pinto now, and they can't even sign him to a $2.5 million deal, right? They've got Rourke Chartier playing third line center in Pinto's spot alongside Tarasenko and Kubalik, which is just crazy. And now they can't even dress a full roster to start the first game of the season. That is something I never thought I would say. And again, it's refreshing to see them dealing with the salary cap because that's just not something they've done. But to not be able to dress a full lineup, let alone have scratches, but a full 12 forward, 6 defenseman lineup, they can't even dress that for game 1 of the season. I find that, like, mind-blowing. Like, it's almost funny because it's just like, how did this happen? How did we get here? You know what I mean? It's crazy. So regardless, and that's because Zach McEwen is injured and he's on the roster too, and they don't think he's going to be able to play. Again, I believe in the forward core. I believe in the defense and the goalies, but, like, they're playing Carolina in Carolina. Right now, the odds have to favor Carolina, and we're going to talk about this more tomorrow, but the odds must favor Carolina quite heavily because the Sens are rolling into this with a lot of unproven figures in their lineup. And by the way, like, the other caveat with the salary cap is that Yuri Schmeichel and Roby Yarventi, and especially Schmeichel, really impressed. I think he had one of the best camps of anybody. And he's making $894,000, and they cannot afford to have him on the lineup, like, on the roster. That's so baffling. $894K. And because they only have $62K in cap space, he has to start in Belleville, even though he's a much better player than, like, a lot of the guys in Ottawa's bottom 6 right now. So let me hear your thoughts on what's going on here, because the Sens are gearing up to face one of the best teams in the NHL after preaching. The worst part is they've preached how important a good start is all summer. Like, that's been the main thing they've said, every single member of the organization. And now they're going to go into Carolina in game 1 where they need to set the tone. And they're going to roll 11 forwards and 6 defensemen with Rourke Chartier as their third-line center and Pinto and Norris nowhere to be found. Like, I hope they get this stuff resolved soon because they can't do this. Like, this is not sustainable for more than a few games at most, in my opinion.
Yeah, that's the thing. It's the murky timeline of it because it could all change tomorrow, literally. Like, Norris could be good to go, and then we're not even having this discussion. They're just missing Pinto, and we're fine. The problem is, because of Norris's situation, you then have a huge hole in the middle of the ice. And look, I'm a big Ridley Gregg guy. I really believe that he'll do well. So it's not necessarily that, like, and even Rourke Chartier, like, he's not going to be Shane Pinto, obviously. Like, but I liked his camp. He had a great camp, and I genuinely believe, like, they'll be okay for a little bit. But like you said, it's not sustainable. And there's a lot to unpack. But the main thing is, and I've got it up on the YouTube here, that Dorion backed himself into a corner. I'm not saying Tarasenko was a bad signing. I don't think Korpisalo was a bad signing. Those were needs they had to address. We talked about it all, leading into the trade. When they got DeBrincat, the goal was to get 2 players back that can play in your middle 6. They got Kubalik, and then they signed Tarasenko. I think those were important things to have happen. The problem now, though, is that in this whole, all throughout training camp is really my problem, because if you knew you were going to go down to the wire with Pinto anyway, then that's fine. But all throughout training camp, all of us were saying, you know what? They can sign him today and then make a trade after. They can do whatever. And that was kind of the team's leverage. Like they had a bit of leverage in those negotiations with Pinto. And I want to make it clear that I'm completely on Pinto's side. You're pinching hundreds of thousands of dollars here. Like it's not a huge it's not like he's asking for 5 or 6 million a year. He's not. He's asking for a very, very reasonable deal. But when you're analyzing a negotiation like that, you have to look at who's got the leverage. And for a little bit, the Sens had the leverage. That went away at 5 p.m. yesterday because they had to set their roster, meaning they have to be cap compliant now. So a trade has to happen first before Pinto's moved. And we had a speculation maybe that with this whole Norris thing, it kind of unfolded over the last, I don't know, 3-4 days, like got new news every single day about it because it was always on the fly. Had some pretty good quotes from DJ Smith about the whole thing because he's obviously frustrated too. And I think when all of that was happening, we all just said, oh, he'll go on LTIR then, just soak the 10 games, whatever it is. But clearly Norris is day to day, and it could be expected that he's back tomorrow. He could be back on Saturday, Sunday, and we'll go from there. But with them not putting him on LTIR, which would have held him out for at least 10 games in 24 days, which would have been November 8th against the Leafs. Now you're in a situation where you need to make a trade before you move Shane Pinto. And people might be asking themselves, why haven't they made a trade yet? Why haven't they moved Joseph or Kubalik or Brandstrom? Because they didn't like the price. I think Joseph's the guy they want to move out. DJ Smith actually went out of his way and said that Matthew Joseph has had a great camp, had one of the best camps out of anyone, and I agree. Because they didn't like the price that they had to attach. Well, guess what's going to happen now? NHL GMs around the league aren't going to be like, oh, we'll do you a favor now. It's even worse for Dorion. If anything, they can hold out even longer. And amid all of this is a rookie centerman from last year who missed an entire season basically for shoulder surgery the year before, comes back and plays 82 games, plays a second line role, was a bit out of his depth for a little bit, but that line struggled. But 20 goals as a rookie is nothing to scoff at. And he played a full season after having significant injuries. And now he's sitting here without a contract and they're lowballing him. And to me, that's all about Dorion backing himself into a corner. I think the Tarasenko signing was a snap call because they needed to address winger scoring depth, and that's fair. They had all summer after that to work something out. And it's not like I said, it isn't like they're trying to pay one of their top guys who's trying to squeeze them for an extra couple $1 million. This is a very small move. And I don't understand why he just basically, he hasn't done anything. Like it's been completely stale or stalemate, I guess. And it's not like even just make a move. If they had traded Joseph and still couldn't come to a contract, totally different story, right? But if you're Shane Pinto and you know that you're going to move out 2.9 million, then why would you sign for less? Like you know the room's there now. That's what's bothering me. I don't blame the team for the Norris situation, like you said. That's kind of a whole other thing, and we can get into that a little bit too, maybe. But the idea that they don't have room for Pinto right now is you cannot defend Pierre Dorion right now, and I've been hard on him all summer, you know that. But there's absolutely no defending this right now. It's a completely self-made issue.
Well, the thing is too is they had like so much time and they knew about this for years now. I mean, they knew this contract was coming, so it really was on them and Pierre Dorion to plan for it. And again, I'll go back to when they signed Tarasenko. I'm going to pull the clip up later, I think, because I just keep referencing it. But right when they signed him, I said, I love this, and I still do love it. I think bringing Tarasenko in is great. I kind of disagree. I mean, I don't think he had a good camp necessarily, but at the same time, I'm not concerned about that at all. I think he'll be an impactful player for them. But I'm going to go back, and when I said, I love this signing, but I really hope they've talked to Shane Pinto, and they've planned for Shane Pinto. Like, if you're not factoring Pinto in and you're handing out $5 million to Tarasenko, and then you're signing McEwen, and then you're signing Korpisalo, and vice versa, whatever, it's like, if you didn't plan for Pinto here, like, you're out of money. You have to have a plan. You can't just spend willy-nilly. You have to have a plan for how you're going to pay every player you need to pay. They also signed Brandstrom immediately for $2 million, right? But, like, did they not even think of Pinto? They just kick the can down the road with Pinto? Because it seems like that's what they've done. And frankly, like, I don't want to be too negative again, but GMs get fired for this type of thing, right? Like, you can't just kick the can down the road, start the season without one of your key players, and then obviously Norris is not Pierre Dorion's fault, but it's another thing that they should have considered, right? If they get off to a bad start now because they're missing these players, like, how do you, as new owner Michael Andlauer with Steve Staios and everybody there, how do you look at, like, the management that's in place and see how they kind of mangled this summer a little bit and keep them intact? I just don't see how it happens. So I think Pierre Dorion and really the whole group, management group, and everybody should be kind of like clenching their teeth a little bit entering this season, because if things go poorly off the bat, this is absolutely a tryout, and they put themselves in this situation where they don't have two of their key players and they're starting the season short. Yeah, you've got something.
Well, that's the thing. It's not even that. Again, like the Norris stuff, I wouldn't if they were going into this year and they had Pinto there and it was just Greg filling in for Norris and we were still short Josh Norris because of what's happening. I wouldn't be blaming Dorion and DJ. Like that's almost out of their hands. They can't control it. But it's like you said, this was their own doing. Not having Pinto there is their own doing. And there's people who are going to mention, like, why aren't you focusing on the positives? There's so much positives to look at with this team. And you're right, there are. And you said it too. And we will. We certainly will. But it's the fact that this is like the stuff you can control. So when the season starts happening, things snowball, injuries happen, bad bounces happen. I'm not going to sit there and just, rip Pierre Dorion because he has built a really good team. It took a lot of time, but we've got one now, right? And this is the stuff that's supposed to be avoidable, and it should be avoidable, and that's the standard that this new regime is probably going to hold them to. You painted yourself into this corner, and now they can't, like, they're not. It's just it's the fact that they're not icing the best roster possible, and it's because of their own doing. If, like, we can talk all day about how good this team is, like you mentioned, I still love the Tarasenko signing. I love the idea of it, but it was still oversight. They prioritized that over Pinto because they felt they needed to address that need, which again is fine. But Pinto is also a very valuable asset, and I think having that happen, because the minute that they signed him, that's when the cap space struggle came in. They didn't add any other pieces after that, I don't think. So I guess the Sokolov signing, but like there wasn't room for Pinto regardless before that. So my point is, immediately when you sign Tarasenko, Pinto gets a little bit of a chip on his shoulder. His agent is like, wait a minute, you forgot about us. Then the longer it snowballs, the longer we're here. And Pinto's digging his heels in. That's totally fine. Because especially now he has to make a move before Pinto's able to be signed. So that's the thing. It's like, this team is so exciting. I'm still all aboard it. We'll talk about it a little bit, like what we think of the lineup right now and how good it is. But it could be better. It could be better, and it's on them that it's not, pretty much.
Well, that's what I was saying, like the very first thing I said, how I'm excited and I'm so optimistic, but I'm also like internally I can feel that I'm disappointed and a little bit frustrated and kind of almost rolling my eyes a little bit entering tomorrow, just because we've looked forward to this season for so long. This is the year where they're really supposed to take a step. Everybody around the organization would tell you that. And again, I'm not saying I don't believe, and we have this caption queued up for after we can get into the expectations and everything. I'm not saying I don't believe in them. I think this whole thing will get resolved at some point. Norris will come back. Hopefully he stays healthy. Pinto will be in the lineup. It's just a matter of when, not if. Like, he's not going to sit out the whole year because like they're going to do something. I mean, I'm sorry, but if you have to attach a sweetener to Matthew Joseph 3 games into the season because you still don't have Pinto signed, just do it. I don't care. Just attach it. As long as it's not a first round pick, I'm attaching that thing all day. I'll send a second. I don't care. It sucks. You'll have to bite the bullet. People will be angry. But guess what? Like, if you're losing games, if things are not going well because you are short at the best or the most important position in hockey at center, like you can't be like half-assing that position. That's something you have to have depth at. And like, I'm going to throw this negativity into the world, and everybody's going to knock on wood for me, because like, imagine in game 1 Tim Stützle gets hurt. Imagine that happens and you just see what happens to this team, because they are done if that happens. Like, they have no depth at center. I love Ridley Gregg too, but that guy's not even a center in my opinion. He should be playing the wing. I like him on the wing more. He's kind of just filling in at center. He's going to move to the wing once Norris and Pinto are in. So it's like, even that is risky, and who knows what'll happen. But again, I believe in the group. I believe in the core. It's just a matter of, like you said, they could be better. And to start the season in Carolina, I am just terrified, to be honest with you. However, I will say that if the preseason was any kind of projection of how they're going to perform, the top dogs are going to come in rolling, because they were goddamn impressive in the preseason. Like Tim Stützle, Brady Tkachuk, Claude Giroux still, and then the entire defense core, like, and the goalies, they played so well in the preseason. I know it's exhibition, but like, if they can come on that same tone and perform at that level and have that compete, I think it is enough to overcome missing Norris and Pinto for at least the first bit, right? Because they've got Carolina, then they've got Philadelphia at home, and then Tampa Bay on a back-to-back. I think Philly and Tampa especially are 2 winnable games. They have to beat Philly for sure. But at the same time, like, if this isn't resolved, it's also not hard to see them going 1-2 in those games, which would be less than desirable. So we'll see. It's just disappointing, and we can kind of get into some of the positives, I know, because people are going to be some people are going to be upset we're harping on this, but it just has to be talked about, right? It's so important, and there's no way to really look past it and work around it in our discussions, just because these are two of the most critical members of the team who are not starting on the roster. And the really crazy thing is that Ottawa's probably going to be short a player for the first game of the season. And they had time. That's the main takeaway here. They had time to look at how this was going to play out and make decisions and figure out ways to work around it, and they just didn't. And Pierre Doria and the people around the organization, when they were interviewed too, like they said themselves, basically like it's going to get figured out. Like they put that into the world where it's going to get figured out. You know, we're working hard on it, and it's going to be ready to go. We're going to be ready to hit the ground running in camp, right? And they just haven't. Like it just hasn't been figured out. It's kind of been delayed, pushed, kicked down the road, and now you're here at the regular season, and you're in a tough situation. So hopefully it gets resolved before Saturday. That's my new goal for them. But I mean, what are they going to move Joseph? And like it seems like they love Matthew Joseph and they don't want to move him. And DJ Smith saying that he had the best camp of anyone. When I read that, I was like, okay, so what are we doing here? Because it doesn't seem like, unless you're just trying to up his trade value with that statement, it doesn't seem like they're inclined to move Joseph anytime soon. So I don't know what their plan is. But hopefully they get off to a good start. I mean, that's all we can do. That's like, we can break it down, sure, but all we can actually do is just hope that the top dogs come out. Jonas Korpisalo posts a shutout in Carolina, and the defense carries them to victory here, because that's all we can do.
You know what's crazy is like the all the games in preseason we saw when the core was playing great. The two that they lost, they had, you know, their top line was their third line essentially, right? Like today, or tomorrow, sorry. Like the top guys came to play in preseason, like you said, and they it's clear that there's a different vibe around them, at least, like Kachuk and Stützle, Giroux, Shabbat, I think looks fantastic, and we'll get into all that. What's a good thing, this is a positive, Pinto and Norris didn't even play in the preseason, so we've kind of seen what they're going to bring us tomorrow, allegedly, right? And that's why I'm going to pose this question, like, is this opening night lineup, so what we see on paper here, is it good enough to make the playoffs? And I don't know where people are going to stand on this. Honestly, without Norris and Pinto, I don't think it is, but with one of them, even, I'll say, like, if you just get Pinto back and Norris is kind of a wild card with the injury, I still think they're good enough. And I think that maybe that's just blind optimism, but goal scoring was not their issue last year. It really wasn't. It was defensive play away from the, like, team defense, let's say, right? And it was a lack of key saves. So if your goaltending is good enough, I genuinely believe this is a good enough hockey team to make some noise in the regular season, as is right now. So that's what's a positive. I do, again, like what we saw in preseason, I was very, very impressed. It's just a matter of carrying that over now. And I do think they will. It is also a positive that Norris is still skating. But and when Pinto comes back, a big thing too is like he's going to need some time to adjust, like Kachuk did. I think Kachuk missed 3 games that season after he signed on opening night. Like he missed opening night and then 2 after that. So assume the same thing will happen with Pinto. Let's say if we get off this recording and he's already signed, like that'll be another couple days, and you're taken away from the roster when you sign Pinto. So there's a lot to think about there, but I do think this is good enough. I think the blue line showed us in preseason that they're elite when they're all healthy. I mentioned Thomas Chabot. He looks fantastic with Chychrun as well. He just looks like he's got his legs back under him, so hopefully that can last. Jake Sanderson looks fantastic as well. Brennan has pulled up the mock lineup, let's say, so we'll talk about it here. I'm assuming it'll stay the same tomorrow, but if it doesn't, we'll break it down on the live stream tomorrow. So why don't we throw it up there, Brennan, and we'll talk about the combo. Support for Everyday Sens podcast is brought to you by Manscaped, who is the best in men's below-the-waist grooming. Their products are precision-engineered tools for your family jewels. Manscaped's Performance Package, the ultimate men's hygiene bundle. Join over 8 million men worldwide who trust Manscaped with this exclusive offer for you. 20% off and free worldwide shipping with the code SENS20 at manscaped.com. The Performance Package 4.0 arrived for me, and honestly, guys, it's a game changer. I didn't really think I needed half the stuff in there, but once you start using it, you realize how important the hygiene is in that down there area. I think men's hygiene is kind of overlooked a lot of the time, and in this day and age, it's kind of on its way back up, or even just back in general. So the Performance Package includes the Lawnmower 4.0, which is the main trimmer. They've got a nose and hair trimmer as well, including a bunch of deodorant products for that down there area. And it's honestly like they include a wash kit, a t-shirt, a pair of underwear. It's the full works in that Performance Package. even if you don't think you need all of that stuff, I recommend just trying out the lawnmower 4.0, excuse me. One of the products alone is worth the time and the price, especially with Everyday Sens promotion with the Sens 20 code. So again, that's get 20% off and free shipping with the code SENS20 at manscaped.com. That's 20% off with free shipping at manscaped.com and use code SENS20. Unlock your confidence and always use the right tools for the job with Manscaped. Now let's get back to the Everyday Sens podcast. So we've got Kachuk, Stützle, and Giroux, Joseph, Greg, Batherson, Kubalik, Chartier, Tarasenko, and then Kelly and Kastelik. Immediately, obviously, what jumps out is that second line. Now, personally, I read that as you basically have 2 third lines, and because there's going to be 11 forwards, assuming Norris doesn't play tomorrow, they have to like rotate a few of them or something like that. You know what I mean? Like the centers are going to play a lot more, or the wingers will. So like Giroux's going to be playing with Kelly Cat. Like they'll no one's going to have positions tomorrow. Is basically it.
It'll be a bit of a mess. Yeah, that's pretty much what's going to be happening. Is they're going to be rotating guys around. I'm sorry, but I do not want to see Claude Giroux on a line with Parker Kelly and Mark Kastelik. That's going to drive me insane. But at the same time, it is good. I know, but it's good to have Giroux on the ice in that situation, anyways. I guess, right? Like, if he can play that much.
Sorry, so think about it. Like when you look at it, like 11 forwards, most of the time, teams will purposely go 3 centers and then 2 extra wingers. But in this case, they've got 4 centers, right? They still do. So it'll be presumably like you'll get one of Kubalik, Joseph, Kachuk, Giroux, Batherson, or Tarasenko playing on that 4th line. Not the worst thing in the world. They're just going to play a lot, and it's going to be a little bit all over the place.
Yeah, hopefully nobody gets hurt. But yeah, I mean, I guess that's true. I'd rather have them on than McEwen. So if they can sustain the minutes, and I guess the first game is a good game to do that because they're going to be fresh, then that's not bad. But yeah, so you got the forward core there, and then you've got Chychrun, Chabot, Sanderson, Zub, Brandstrom, Hamonic on defense. Obviously, the defense looks fantastic. Even if you don't think Hamonic is a strong piece, I think he's good enough to hold his own. And especially because he's with Brandstrom, who's looked so good in the preseason. Looks like he's just prepared to take off defensively this year. So really the combos on paper, to answer your question, is this opening night lineup good enough to make the playoffs? If this was their lineup all year, I'd probably say no, just because I feel like that center depth is not sustainable. And I think you also have to factor in more injuries happening, because I'm sure they will. Like, I mean, like I said, if somebody like Tim gets hurt right now, the whole season is a wash in my mind. I just don't think they could live without somebody like that. So hopefully they stay healthy. But again, this won't be their lineup all year, so it's kind of a like, it doesn't really matter anyways. They're going to have Norris and Pinto in there at some point. I don't like this lineup very much, though. I'm concerned about it. But, I mean, I've said it. I just think that they're going to have to rely on their defense and their goaltending. It's going to be a complete polar opposite of last year, where scoring was like their huge thing and offense was everything that they did. Their power play was like, if they got a power play that you were like, they need to score here, and then they would score, and they ranked 8th in the league. They obviously kind of struggled to finish, but they were one of the best teams with expected goals, which means they were just dominant offensively. The problem is they were terrible defensively, and I'm hesitant to even say that. They were more so terrible from a goaltending perspective, but defensively their forwards really struggled too, so I'm interested to see kind of how this forward core manages to play defensively. Regardless, so I think that the preseason showed us this defense is going to be special, because Chabot and Chychrun together, I mean, Chabot looked different. Like, he looked like a different defenseman than we've seen over the last while. Even Sanderson obviously looks like he's ready to take another step. Brandstrom too. This core on defense is, I think, one of the better ones in the league. Like, we talked about how they have 3 number 1 defensemen, basically, or almost 3 number 1 defensemen. And then Zub even is like a very good second pairing guy. Most teams don't have that. We broke down, we compared them to other Atlantic teams and even some Metro teams. And it was basically like those teams had 1 really good defenseman, and then their next 3 dropped off significantly. It's not like that for Ottawa. They've got a ton of firepower back there. And that's like, none of them are even like liabilities defensively. They're 2-way defensemen. And hopefully Chabot can kind of clean up some of his mistakes. But they have a very strong 2-way game. They just need their forwards to buy into that as well. And I almost think that should be the flip side of it. And I know people like offense. I do too. But I almost think to start the year without having Norris and Pinto, they should really try to focus on like winning the game defensively, winning in the trenches. Just, I know I'm at the top of the list of hating like the gritty more game. I like the skill. I like to really have puck possession. But I think facing a team like Carolina especially, you're going to have to rely on some of this more gritty, the gritty areas and kind of the more physical aspects of the game than skill. Because frankly, like, you put the second and third line out there, and you said it, they're kind of like 2 third lines, and you're going to be facing some guys who are very good players in Carolina, especially in Tampa too. I think they're going to have to win in the trenches, and that's going to be the key to the game, and we're going to get into that more tomorrow. But yeah, hopefully they can survive here in the first few, because this lineup, again, not sustainable at all, but I could see them also starting off well despite missing their 2 guys. It just depends on how they play defensively is kind of the key over the first few games to me, and how their goaltenders step up as well.
I mean, you look at it too, they are still deep on the wings, and that's kind of the benefit of being over the cap or being at the cap when your centermen aren't, lined up, because you have too much depth on the wings now, right? Um, I agree. I think the blue line to me is the key this season. I think they'll push the pace. I'm not scared of having any of those 6 guys out on the ice at any time. And yeah, Hamonic is the one guy who we're all gonna be looking at. He's gonna make mistakes and stuff like that, but in that role, I think he will be much better served than he was in years past, playing with Sanderson and playing with whoever it was before. Like, I like the look of that. Like listen, okay, we're talking about Carolina, right? Are you going to be nervous just on paper when Aho and whoever he's playing with come over the boards and Branstrom and Hamnick are out there? I'm not, because that's not going to be the matchup, but they're going to be looking at that pairing and being like, that's the one we want them out there against, probably. And to me, that's like a great problem to have. On the flip side, tomorrow, going into Carolina, the Hurricanes, you mentioned the Sens having one of the best blue lines in the league. I think the Hurricanes have the best one, period. They have so much depth. They've got Burns, Orlov, they signed in the summer, Slavin, Pesci, like they are loaded back there. I think D'Angelo and another really good player are their third pairing, which is just ridiculous. So that's going to be an issue, right? Matching up, you don't want Chartier out there against Burns and all that, but like that, it's a small sample size. I'm not going to be overreacting if they lose tomorrow. I'm really not. They went 0-2 to start the year last year, stormed back and were 4-2. So there's options there, but it's just when it's self-inflicted, like you said, it's not ideal. I still believe in the lineup. I like the roster. I still think they're going to make the playoffs. I believe in everything that they've done up to this point, believe in the top guys, but it hurts. And I got to be wondering what Mr. Staios is thinking his first week and a half on the job, and there's no movement. So we'll see how that all plays out. One question we didn't actually talk about, though, is the goaltending, right? We talked about how it's not an issue. It's a good problem because they both played so well in preseason. Who do you start tomorrow? Like, who are you leaning towards in Carolina opening night? Who's getting the call? I don't think they announced it. I think they're going to do a whole, like, oh, we're going to tell you tomorrow kind of thing.
I'm going Korpisalo, and I love Anton Forsberg. I would not be upset if they started Forsberg, but at the same time, we've talked a lot about Pierre Dorion and his decisions. I think that especially if Shane Pinto is not in this lineup because you didn't have the money to sign him, it's going to be a real bad look if you're not starting the guy you're paying $4 million a year for 5 years. Like, you know what I mean? That's just not a good perspective for Pierre Dorion. I think he's going to take a lot of flack if he chooses, or if Smith chooses to start Forsberg, just because like you're missing Pinto because of the whole salary cap restraints, but like you're kind of in that situation partly because you signed Korpisalo to a big deal. If you're saying now that maybe we shouldn't have done that, or we trust Forsberg more, and again maybe they end up, like, it could very well happen that Forsberg starts more games, but like to start the year, if you're saying that you're already kind of more on Forsberg than you are on Korpisalo, and you want to start him over him, then that's just not a good look for Dorian or for anybody, because now Pinto really, it feels like maybe we shouldn't have signed Korpisalo in that case if we have a starter in Forsberg, right? Either way, like I said, I think they're going to be a great tandem, but I still, regardless of the whole look of it, I still would start Korpisalo just because he made that 40 save shutout in against Pittsburgh, and he looked fantastic there in the preseason. And frankly, I'm just excited to see him play. Like, I just want to see him play. He's new, right? We all love our new shiny toys, and that's Jonas Korpisalo. So I want to get him in there and get him going. And it really does just come back to the fact that they signed him to be the starter. So I think Forsberg's going to play more games than people expect, but I still think that Korpisalo has to be in that 1A role to start the year at least. If he starts to perform poorly, get Forsberg in there. But I think to start, show us Korpisalo, show us what he's made of, show us why you signed him to a massive $20 million contract and why he's part of the reason Shane Pinto is sitting out on the sidelines.
That's fair. I'm going to go the other way. I'm going to say Forsberg just because, not for the sake of debate, but because I like Forsberg in Carolina. He had that big game a couple of years ago there. I think did they draft him, or was that Columbus? It might have been Columbus, but he has some history with Carolina, right? Like he's there's a reason he played well there. I think there was some kind of story on it at the time, but
He played there too. Yeah.
yeah. So he played there. He's put on waivers by them, I think. So he's got the motivation. I think it's really a yes or yes question, right? Like you can't really go wrong at this point based on what we've seen. It will be interesting because we're going to see both this weekend because they play back to back. They don't really have a back to back for a while after that though. So it'll be interesting. I'm imagining for the beginning they're just going to go back and forth because you don't want to risk one guy getting cold, and I think a tandem is the way to go until you need to play one more than the other. Um, yeah, I'll go Forsberg. Give Korpisalo the home opener. Like, is it more important to give him the season opener? Because presumably whoever gets this game is going to play on Sunday and won't play against Philly. So do you want Korpisalo against Philly? You want to tee him up? Like, I don't know, man. It'll be fluid. I think they'll probably go with Korpisalo though, like you said, for all those other reasons. But I'd like to see Forsberg. I'm an Anton Forsberg guy. Yeah, like I don't want to say like we're out of stuff to talk about because we're not. It's just it's hard to know the direction. Like let's hit on Josh Norris a bit then. How about that? Because we haven't really. I think all that stuff kind of happened and we didn't record. Just in terms of the timing. So where are you at with Josh Norris? Like, are you worried? The last we know now is he's day to day been skating with a non-contact jersey, so a normal regular practice jersey, not partaking in line stuff because he's not playing tomorrow. I don't think, but he's day to day is what the label is. What were your feelings just when all that was coming out and how they had to? I think it was 2 days ago where they had the pretty big media thing with DJ talking about it because we needed some answers.
Well, up until that point, I was still pretty confident he was going to play in the opener. I mean, I just felt like if he wasn't going to play, and this is kind of how I felt, last night, today. If he's not going to play, I just almost felt like they were going to put him on LTIR because, like, how serious is this? If Norris is going to miss 7 or 8 games, then we're really going to regret not putting him on LTIR, frankly, because if you have to go without Pinto for that extent of time and Norris isn't playing either, like, you should have just put him on LTIR. So hopefully the fact that he's not on LTIR kind of is proving that they are truly confident in his day-to-day status. I think that's what it shows, but at the same time, if the weekend comes and goes and he's still not playing, I'm going to be kind of leaning towards the fact that maybe they should have just put him on LTIR so they could get Pinto signed, kick the can down the road, and reevaluate when you get to the point that he's ready to come back, because how serious is this injury, right? Like, is it mental? Is it physical? We don't even know. Like, they've said both, so it's kind of been a mess with the media too. We have no clarity on what is actually happening with Norris. But it certainly does seem like he's been practicing with a contact jersey for quite a while. Like, I think for most of the preseason he was wearing a contact jersey other than the first 2 games, and he's still not ready. Like, there's been videos of him battling and taking contact, and I don't know if it is just mental, but whatever it is, it needs to get sorted. And I know on Twitter there's been a big thing about, like, give him as much time as he needs. I agree, like, let him recover, but if he's not going to play, like, I would try to get kind of a timeline out of him if it is kind of mental, because if he's not going to play, just put him on LTIR. They cannot afford to have a negative record after the first 10 games because they're missing 2 of their key centers, right? So I think they have to make a decision there, but it seems like they're not going to put him on long term, so that's good. Like, I'm excited. I'm hopeful he's going to play this weekend or shortly after, but other than that, like, I don't know where he's at. We have no clarity on this, and we're kind of at a loss. So yeah, I want to hear your thoughts on it, and then we could also do our standings prediction as well.
Yeah, that's a good one. I forgot that we were gonna do that, and I'll come up with something on the fly. No, I'm kidding. I've got it all ready. But yeah, like with Norris, it's tough because you want the player to do what's best for the player. And don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that I want the opposite because that's what it's all about. But it's so frustrating, man, as a fan, and I know it is for him, I know it is for the team, but it's I think DJ actually said some great stuff about it because he was saying, in the summer, I'm prepping for him being in the lineup night 1. I think he said today, like, we had him penciled in for 4 or 5 exhibition games. He's going to get all the reps he needed. But that didn't happen. And what's annoying is that we won't get to see this team at full strength until he's there. And, like, there's no guarantee that everyone's going to be healthy when he gets there. Right. So there's a lot of that going on. We should point out he is traveling with the team tomorrow, and he's day to day, so maybe he wakes up and is good to go, and then we're having a whole other conversation. Like, that would be huge, but like the way the team was talking, it doesn't sound like he's going to play. Just thought I'd note that because they're not going on a road trip. They come home for 5 games after this quick trip to Carolina, so little business trip for the guys that they're probably on the plane right now. I don't really know what to say about it, to be honest. That's all I got, and it's just you got to wait and see until he's good enough. But even when he comes back, I'm going to be holding my breath every time he's on the ice until I just get comfortable. And I'm sure he's going to be the same. I think him, the mental battle of getting over an injury like that. I think a lot of people come out on Twitter and just kind of talked about their experiences with major injuries and like going back to the sport you play. It takes a while to reacclimate yourself and just get used to all the other, the hitting and the shooting and the face-offs and all that. So there's a lot of moving parts with Norris, which is unfortunate, but at the end of the day, we can't really. No, I think DJ said it himself, or maybe might have been Bruce Garriock actually in his article. Just no one knows except for Josh, right? And that's what's frustrating about it, I think, for fans. But it is encouraging. I think it's more encouraging now than it felt a couple days ago that he's still skating every day and he's going on the trip. But you're right. If you get to game 8 or 9 and he hasn't played or he's going to suit up in game 9, then it's like, well, what do we do this all for, right? You could have just had him on LTIR, had Pinto there, make a move after like that. That's what's frustrating, but we'll see. We'll see. That's basically all we can go for. Maybe there's an update on him tomorrow. I'm sure he'll skate, get a bag skate in. Let's do our predictions. I think we'll wrap up after that just because we are clearly going to have a lot to talk about tomorrow too, hopefully, and we'll preview Sens v Carolina, the first of 82 games, and it'll be a big year. So stay tuned tomorrow. Again, we'll be live around 6 Eastern, probably, maybe a bit earlier if we get a little antsy and we can, but we'll see. So Brennan, why don't you start with your Atlantic Division standings? I think that's what we can do. Atlantic, we can do East if you want to. Just playoff picture pretty much.
Yeah, well, I've got my Atlantic here, so I'll start with that. So, this was tough, honestly, because I want to believe that the Sens are going to be like a top 3 team, and I wouldn't. The way I put it, and it's very dependent, right? Because it all depends on how. Like, we haven't seen Korpisalo play in Ottawa. We haven't seen Norris stay healthy. We haven't seen, obviously, Pinto's not starting the year here. We haven't seen how Tarasenko's going to perform. There's a lot of unknowns, right? We don't know a ton about how this team is going to perform together, but on paper, when they're healthy and when Pinto is signed, they look very promising. So my prediction kind of banks on that. It kind of banks on some other things, but I'm going to go first. So number 1, Toronto. I think that has to be the consensus for people just because they're going to lose in the first round, but like they can win in the regular season. They've shown that. So congrats to them. And then I'm going to go number 2. And again, I wouldn't be shocked if Ottawa makes it into the top 3, but I also wouldn't be shocked if they don't. That's kind of the way I see them. I feel like they could go either way, and that's kind of indecisive. Yes, I am indecisive at this point, but like I really wouldn't be shocked if they make waves and they really take a step like New Jersey. That's what the goal should be, but I wouldn't be shocked if they kind of just like squeeze into a wild card either. They really are a complete unknown in my mind because I certainly think they're going to make the playoffs, and I think that's the expectation, but where they rank in the playoff picture is really hard to put because on paper right now, like with this lineup, they don't rank very high. But if they're all healthy and they stay healthy and Korpisalo has another good year, I could see them absolutely passing teams ahead of them. So we'll see. But I've got Toronto, then I've got Tampa. And listen, I think Tampa could take a step back. I do. But until they do, it's going to be hard for me to kind of accept that. So hopefully they take a step back and we have that year that Ian Mendez talked about when he was on the show with Tampa and Boston, these teams regressing, and then Ottawa and Buffalo and these other teams kind of stepping up. Hopefully that's this year, but Tampa, until they regress, I'm not going to doubt them too much. I know they struggled at the end of last year. Third, I'm going to go Florida, and that's a bit bold. I think that a lot of people will have Boston there, but I'm going to go Florida just because I think they had that great playoff run. They looked really good at the end of last year, and we'll see. Like, I'm not even that high on Florida. It's another situation where I feel like this could be totally wrong, but I'm going to go with Florida. In the sense that I do think they finished the year off well and they are set up, although I think they have some injuries to start this year too, so we'll see about that, but keep an eye on it. Fourth, I'm going to go Ottawa, so that's the wild card. I'm going to put them in the first wild card seed. I think that the Sens are going to push for that top 3 in the Atlantic, but I don't know if they're going to get there, and I don't think that people should be disappointed if they don't get there. I think that if they get into the playoffs at all, it should be considered a good season, and especially with the way they're starting now, right? I'm going to put Ottawa there, though, and then I put Boston below them. And I don't know if that'll be an actual wild card or not, just because it maybe a Metro team squeaks in. But I do think that the Boston could be there, and I think Buffalo is going to be right behind them. It's going to be a competition here for Ottawa between, I think, Ottawa, Florida, Tampa, everybody after Toronto, other than Montreal. Like, it's going to be just a complete battle, and in Detroit too, maybe. But I think that Boston is going to regress. I think Tampa, I wasn't sure on. Boston, losing your top 2 centers is no small thing. That is a massive deal. I know they still have good defense. They still have the Vezina winner and Allmark and whatnot, but like I'm sorry, losing Patrice Bergeron, David Krejci, there's no way. If Boston manages to be still at the top here and still just a cup contending team without those guys, like they're ageless. They are in the fountain of youth, because I don't understand how they could keep competing after losing two of the most key players on their team. So I'm going to call them out again and say that they're going to regress. I did it last year too, and it didn't work. So this year I'm more confident they're going to regress. Tampa I'm a little more hesitant on, but I think it's going to be very close after Toronto in the Atlantic. Like, I really think Ottawa's going to be right there with Tampa, Florida, Boston, Buffalo, maybe Detroit. Those teams are going to all be fighting for a few spots. And I am confident, though, that Ottawa's going to squeak in, whether it's in the top three or in a wild card. But Atlantic games this year are going to be very important. Divisional games are going to be huge, so keep an eye on their record. Because that's probably going to be the difference, is how they play against each other.
They are, and I think someone actually mentioned on Twitter a couple weeks ago, I saw it, that the Sens record against the Western Conference was bad last year, and that was kind of what bit them. They were good against the East and I think the Atlantic as well. So okay, I'm just keeping notes of it on my phone, and we'll go back to it obviously at the end of the year. But so you got Toronto first, Tampa second, Florida in third, Ottawa in the fourth place with the wild card one. Boston, I didn't write down wild card because we'll just assume that it's Metro or whatever. Then Buffalo close, Detroit, and then Montreal is what you have. Okay. All right. I'm going to go a little bit of a different direction after Toronto. I do have the Leafs winning the division. They've actually never won the Atlantic division. They won the North division in 2021. I don't think they've actually won the Atlantic in this whole era. So I think that ends this year. This is going to be their first year doing that. This is, again, like you said, it's where it gets murky because of these next, like I'm going in order of your list, like of Tampa, Florida, Ottawa, Boston, and Buffalo, 5 teams for 4 spots, maybe. 3 for sure. Like, again, maybe. So that to me is like 2 of those teams are going to be very disappointed at the end of the year, assuming Buffalo's got the same aspirations as Ottawa. I think they do, to make the playoffs. So 2 of those guys are going home disappointed this year. No doubt, at least. In second, I'm going to go with Tampa as well, because I do think that, losing Vasilevsky for the first 2 months is going to hurt them. And again, he was the reason last year that they even had a sniff at the playoffs. And again, no one was pushing, but that to me is who I got second. I just think that like having the rest for them is going to be huge. This is the longest summer they've had, and it can only be good for older guys. So I have Tampa going second. I think they're going to go off. They could even win the division, to be honest. But the reason I don't have them winning is because Vasilevsky's not there for the first bit. Third, I'm going to go with the Sens. I'm doing the Sens in third. I think, like I said, and like you mentioned, actually, is that this is a team that could finish top 3. And it's not that I'd be disappointed in a wild card, but you look around the league and just in general, obviously every team goes through adversity, but teams that were in the wild card spot, namely the second one in each conference, like 8th spot in each conference, is usually a team that went on a run or, had a huge lull, right? And to me, I just want the Sens to be a shoe-in. I want them to be like the Devils, not like that good. They don't have to win 15 games in a row, but I don't want any question marks throughout the season of them being a playoff team. Like they should, with the schedule they have to open, I think they could vault themselves to the top of the Atlantic and then just hold it from there. I really do. I think they can. I think it's 9 of 13 before they go to Sweden or something like that, or at home. So that's more than half, obviously. Like I'm very, very bullish on the Sens roster. I think third, is more than within reach. So we go Toronto, Tampa, Ottawa. This is where it gets tough, man. I really don't know. I do think it's going to be 2 teams from the Atlantic, though, in the wild card. I don't think that'd be crazy to say. It's pretty rare, actually, that I think about it. It's usually 1 and 1, but I'm going to go with, this is where it gets tough. Like, I'm going to go Buffalo in the 4th. I think Buffalo is going to do that first wild card spot. And then I'm going Florida in the second one again, for the second straight year. So I've got Buffalo in 4th, Florida in 5th, taking the second wild card spot in the East for the second year in a row. That's what I've got. Then Boston, then Detroit, then Montreal. So what are your thoughts on that for me there?
Yeah, I like it. I think I'm low on Buffalo compared to most people. Most people actually have Buffalo ranked above Ottawa. Like a lot of people have them in the top 3 in the Atlantic. And I mean, Buffalo shows a lot of potential, but I think they are also in trouble relying on Devin Levi entirely to do all of the heavy lifting for them in net. So Because of that, I'm low on them in case there are any Sabres fans watching. But I like yours. I mean, we're not too far off from each other. Like, you're lower on Boston, I'm lower on Buffalo. I would honestly be fine with putting Buffalo where Boston was on my list too. Boston, it's just the same as Tampa, where like I have a hard time doubting them until we actually see them fall off. And that's also why people are not high on Ottawa, right? Like, they have a hard time believing in the Sens until the Sens show them they can actually do something. It's the whole thing of proving yourself. And for me, it's just like the opposite with Tampa and Boston, where I need to see them prove that they aren't that team anymore. And then Ottawa needs to prove that they are that team. But until Tampa and Boston fall off, I'm very nervous to doubt them, because last year I was so low on Boston. I thought they were gonna have a bad year, and then they were like the best team in history. So it's so hard to predict like what's gonna actually happen. But again, a lot of this too, it relies on health, right? It relies on like if someone gets hurt, if Tim Stützle gets hurt, like we talked about earlier, this whole thing changes. The whole season trajectory changes, right? Like it's hard, but assuming everyone stays healthy, those are our predictions. And I mean, yeah, we'll see. Like, I think Ottawa, both of us, regardless of where, I think like we both think too that it's going to be competitive, right? There's going to be a lot of teams in the same window, sort of, where they're going to be within 10 points of each other. I think it's going to come down to the last couple of months of the season. The Sens last year were 39, 35 and something was their record. I think this year you definitely need to hit 40 plus wins, right? They were 6 points out of the playoffs last year. Their goal should be 100 points, I think, at least this year, maybe probably more. And that's attainable. Like, it is attainable. And the fact that now facing teams like Tampa, really everybody aside from Toronto in the Atlantic, when they face them, I'm not scared, I guess you could say. Like, when we would face Tampa in past years, Boston, it felt like, all right, like I can pencil this in as a loss and be comfortable. Like, we can kind of look to bounce back in the next one if you went through their schedule. This year, I don't do that. This year, I'm looking at those teams and I'm like, these games are winnable. Like, the Sens are in a winnable position against every team. Even Toronto, they've played so well over the last few years. Like, even those games are winnable, but like, it's just different than the past years where I felt like there was penciled losses for them. Like, the Sens are good enough now, they should be able to compete with any team in the league. If we go through their schedule, it's easy to mark down L's on the top teams, but I really think that they should be able to win those games against the powerhouses of the NHL, especially once they get Norris and Pinto back, because that's when they're in full swing. But they're in a position now where they need to win tough games. And down the stretch, when they're right in there for a wild card seed, which they probably will be at some point, they're going to be battling with other teams. You can't lose 5-0 to the Chicago Blackhawks. You just can't do it. I don't want to see that happen again. They cannot like crumble under the pressure, as Brady Tkachuk said last year, right? It's about now winning, being clutch, right? They're at the age now where they need to be clutch and they need to be able to win games when they matter. So that's kind of all I've got for today. I mean, we're hitting 51 minutes again, so near an hour, right? Tomorrow we're going to go live. We got a lot to talk about. We're going to know the full lineup when we do go live. Like, we're going to have everything in place for tomorrow. We can even break down, like, we could throw up, I actually threw Carolina's lines up here on Daily Faceoff on one of my tabs, just because I wanted to see what you were talking about the defense. Yeah, they've got Jacob Slavin, Brent Burns, Brady Shea, Brett Pesce, Dmitry Orlov, Tony DeAngelo on defense. It's going to be a tough matchup.
That's got to be the best in the league by a mile.
Sveshnikov is day-to-day. Is he out too? He might be out.
I mean, he had that knee surgery before the playoffs, but I thought he was going to be back.
Yeah, he's listed as day-to-day, so if he's missing, that kind of evens things out for missing Norris too. But who knows? We'll find out tomorrow, right? I think we can throw up both lineups. Maybe I'll make a graphic or something, and we can just compare them, like go through and compare and kind of make our predictions, and we'll get viewers involved, right? We're going to go live, like you said, around 6 Eastern, around an hour before the game, maybe a bit more. Look on the socials to find it, and other than that, yeah, get excited, because it's Sens hockey. Win or lose here, we've got the regular season back.
Yeah, so just a couple things here before we wrap up. You mentioned the schedule, and a couple days ago I went through it, just looking ahead, seeing who's on the radar for the end of October at least. And so start obviously tomorrow in Carolina. This is the rest of their schedule for October. Home against Philly, home against Tampa. That's a back-to-back. Then it's Wednesday, home against Washington, home against Detroit, home against Buffalo, and then at New York Islanders, at Penguins. And that's October. Every single one of those games is winnable, except for tomorrow. And I still think they have a chance tomorrow. Like, that's how, favorable this opening schedule is. For people who like odds and stuff like that, Carolina is pretty heavily favored tomorrow. The score has them at minus 195, which is pretty significant in hockey. Like, usually it's tighter. Yeah, so that's a little bit of a kick in the. For reference, actually, this is just to explain odds. The Leafs against the Habs tomorrow are minus 290. So not quite a significant favorite, but like tonight, Tampa is minus 155 over the Predators. So it's like, yeah, the Sens are not very heavily liked tomorrow. I'm not again suggesting you should go throw some money on the Sens because I don't think maybe it's the Sens money line. It just started early. And the other thing I want to mention, we didn't even talk about it. I haven't talked about it on social media. I've seen it everywhere. The NHL banning Pride tape. I just wanted to mention something really quickly. I'm wearing my Ottawa is Love shirt from their Pride night from last year. It was an awesome night. And the NHL did two things. They scrapped Pride nights and then they scrapped the tape for players and stuff like that. Like, it doesn't need to be said how dumb that is to me. I think, I didn't tweet about it on purpose because you're just throwing a log on the fire and it's just going to get lost in the void, I find. But it's nice seeing everyone get all mad about it because it's just ridiculous to me. So I just want to point that out. Thought the shirt would be more visible on here, but I guess I'm a little top heavy there with the head. But yeah, like it's not even oh, people need to be better or whatever. It's just like it's just a step backwards to me. That's all I wanted to say about it. Yeah, that's pretty much it. So we'll see you everyone tomorrow right here on YouTube. If you're listening on the audio, join us at 6 p.m. Eastern. What's that? 4 p.m. Mountain Time there for Brennan. Tomorrow for the live stream to preview the Ottawa Senators regular season. All right, we did it. We got here. Lots to break down. So we'll see you everyone there. Subscribe to the YouTube page. You'll get a little notification when we go live. And check our socials. Check Instagram, Twitter for all that. Use 20% off at manscaped.com. All the works. And we'll see everyone next time.